Your mother has escaped the nursing home." The words hit me like a brick. I choked on my toast, coughing so violently that my coffee nearly tipped over. "Excuse me?" I rasped, gripping my phone tighter. The voice on the other end belonged to Miss Collins, the head nurse at Maplewood Senior Living, where my 78-year-old mother, Evelyn, had been living for the past 6 months. Normally, she sounded calm and professional. Today, she sounded like someone who had just realized they were missing a very important piece of inventory. "We can't find her anywhere, Mr. Parker," she exclaimed. "One of our aides saw her in the garden this morning, and then she was just gone." I shot up from my chair, nearly knocking it over. "What do you mean gone?" Miss Collins hesitated. "Well, according to the security cameras, at approximately 8:15 a.m., your mother casually walked out the front door." I blinked. "You mean she just strolled out? Like she was going on a morning jog?" There was an awkward pause. We believe she used alternative means of exit." "Alternative means?" I repeated, already regretting asking. A longer silence. Then, in a much lower voice, she admitted, "We think she distracted our new receptionist with homemade cookies, and then crawled out through the side gate while he was eating them." I swear, my soul left my body for a moment. "She what?" "I know it sounds bad." I rubbed my temples. "You're telling me that my 78-year-old mother, who constantly complains about her bad knees, just escaped from a secured facility by pulling off a prison break using baked goods?" "Yes," she admitted weakly. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. This was classic Evelyn Parker. My mother had never been the kind of woman to follow rules, not when she was young, and apparently not now either. "Did she leave anything behind?" I asked, already bracing myself. "Well," Miss Collins hesitated. "We found a bus ticket stub on her nightstand. Route 23. I frowned. "Route 23? That heads toward downtown, doesn't it?" "Yes," she confirmed. "And, there was also a small note under her crossword book." "What did it say?" There was a rustling of paper on the other end. Then Miss Collins read aloud, "Riverside Café, 10 a.m. I checked my watch. 9:45 a.m. I grabbed my keys. "I'm on my way." The drive to Riverside Café took exactly 10 minutes, but my stress levels had aged me at least a decade by the time I pulled into the parking lot. The cafe was a quaint little spot overlooking the Willamette River. The kind of place where retirees gathered to sip coffee and swap stories about their grandkids. It was peaceful, picturesque, and exactly the kind of place my mother would go if she wanted to pretend she wasn't a fugitive from assisted living. I stepped out of the car, scanning the crowd. My heart pounded, and then I spotted her. There she was, my runaway mother, sitting at a small table near the water, sipping tea like she hadn't just pulled off the greatest elderly heist of all time. She wore a navy blue dress, her silver hair neatly curled, a pearl necklace resting against her collarbone. She looked elegant, serene, like an aging movie star enjoying her retirement. Except she wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was a man, a well-dressed, gray-haired man. I stared, my brain struggling to process the scene. Who the hell was that? And that's when disaster struck. A strong gust of wind ripped through the patio, sending a large standing menu board crashing toward me. I barely had time to react. The laminated board smacked into my chest, knocking me back a step. For a moment, all I could see was a colorful list of breakfast specials. Then, "Benjamin Parker, what on earth are you doing?" I peeked over the top of the menu board, my face burning. Mom was staring at me, one eyebrow raised in amused disbelief. The gray-haired man beside her, the mystery man, chuckled into his coffee cup. I groaned and pushed the board aside. "I should be asking you that, Mom." She took a slow sip of her tea, completely unbothered. "I'm having breakfast with Frank." She gestured toward the man, who smiled politely at me. "Frank, this is my son, Ben." "Ben, this is Frank, my boyfriend." I blinked. Frank extended a hand. "Nice to meet you, Ben." I shook it automatically, still too stunned to function. "Boyfriend?" Mom nodded. I turned back to Frank. "Boyfriend?" He nodded too. "Yep." I turned back to Mom. "Since when do you have a boyfriend?" Mom sighed, clearly amused by my existential crisis. Oh, don't look so shocked. What? Did you think I moved into that boring old nursing home just to play bingo for the rest of my life? I opened my mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. She smirked. Cat got your tongue? Frank chuckled. Evelyn told me you were a little overprotective. I ignored him. Mom, you escaped from Maplewood for a date. She rolled her eyes. I wouldn't call it escaping. I simply left. You crawled out through a side gate after bribing a receptionist with cookies. Her eyes twinkled. Well, when you put it that way, it does sound rather dramatic. I pressed my fingers to my temples. I could already feel the headache forming. Mom, I said slowly, trying to control my voice, you disappeared without telling anyone. Do you have any idea how worried I was? She patted my hand gently. Oh, sweetheart, I'm 78, not dead. I can take care of myself. I exhaled sharply. And Frank? I gestured toward the man who was now buttering a scone like he hadn't just been caught up in a senior citizen elopement scandal. How long has this been going on? Mom beamed. For months. I nearly fell out of my chair. For months? Frank grinned. Your mother is a very charming woman, Ben. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or check myself into a mental hospital. Mom took another sip of tea, then smiled sweetly. Oh, and Ben? I braced myself. What? She reached into her purse, pulled out a small velvet box, and placed it on the table. I was actually planning on asking Frank something very important today. I froze. Frank's eyes widened. And then, before I could say another word, my mother flipped open the box and asked the question that nearly made me faint. Frank, will you marry me? For a solid 5 seconds, my brain shut down. I couldn't hear the clinking of coffee cups, the murmur of nearby conversations, or even the birds chirping along the riverside. The world had completely stopped. All I could see was my mother, sitting there with a velvet ring box in front of her, looking expectantly at Frank as if she had just asked him whether he wanted more sugar in his tea. Meanwhile, Frank looked like he had been hit by a bus, stunned, blinking rapidly, his mouth slightly open. His eyes darted between my mother and the small, gleaming ring inside the box. And me? I was still trying to figure out whether I was hallucinating. Maybe the stress of the morning had finally fried my brain. Maybe I'd passed out in my car and was currently having some bizarre fever dream. Because there was no way my 78-year-old mother had just proposed marriage to a man she had been secretly dating for 4 months. Frank cleared his throat, finally snapping out of his shock. Then suddenly, to my absolute horror, his face broke into the biggest, most joyful grin I'd ever seen on a man his age. Well, I'll be damned, he chuckled, shaking his head. This is not how I expected my morning to go. Mom tilted her head. You seem surprised. Of course I'm surprised. I was going to propose to you. There was a beat of silence. Then, without missing a single second, my mother burst out laughing. I looked between the two of them, feeling like I had stepped into an alternate universe. Wait, what do you mean you were going to propose? Frank sighed, reaching into his jacket pocket. And to my absolute disbelief, he pulled out a small velvet ring box of his own. I slapped a hand over my face. Oh, for the love of... The people at the nearby tables had definitely noticed what was happening now. A group of elderly women in matching floral blouses were whispering excitedly, their eyes wide. A young couple had completely stopped eating, their forks frozen in midair. Even the barista behind the counter had leaned forward, his jaw hanging open. Frank let out a deep chuckle, shaking his head. Well, I guess this settles it. Evelyn, my dear. He flipped open his ring box, revealing a simple but elegant gold band. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Mom smirked. Frank, you stole my moment. Hey, you stole mine first. I was in hell. This was not how I had expected my Saturday to go. And then, before I could say a single word, my mother turned to me. Ben, she said, eyes twinkling, since Frank and I seem to be at an impasse, I think it's only fair that you decide. I stared at her, completely dumbfounded. Decide what? Who gets to propose officially, of course. I nearly choked. Mom, I am not picking which one of you gets to propose first. This isn't The Bachelor. Frank snickered. I wouldn't mind a dramatic rose ceremony, if I'm being honest. Mom swatted his arm playfully. Hush you. I groaned, rubbing my temples. All right, I sighed, already regretting everything. If I have to choose, I pointed at Frank. You do it. Frank looked pleased. Mom pouted. Why does he get to do it? Because, I said, exasperated, tradition or something. Mom sighed but waved at Frank. Go ahead, dear. Frank turned to her, his expression warm. He reached for her hands and held them gently in his own. Evelyn Parker, you are the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. You make me laugh, you challenge me, and you make my life brighter every single day. So, with all my heart, will you marry me? Mom grinned. Well, since my son insists, I suppose I must say yes. Applause erupted from the surrounding tables. The group of elderly ladies were practically in tears. The young couple clapped enthusiastically. Even the barista whistled and cheered. And me? I just slumped back in my chair, utterly defeated. My mother had escaped from a nursing home, kept a secret boyfriend for 4 months, and then got engaged, all before lunchtime. I needed a drink. Later that afternoon, after the initial excitement had settled and my mother had finished soaking up every ounce of attention from the cafe patrons, I found myself sitting across from her and Frank at a quiet corner table. So, I said, rubbing my temples, you're actually serious about this? Mom gave me an incredulous look. Ben, of course I'm serious. I just agreed to marry the man, didn't I? Frank patted my shoulder. I know it's a lot to take in, son. Don't call me son. But your mom and I, we're not exactly kids. When you reach our age, you don't waste time overthinking things. You just go for what makes you happy. Mom nodded. I've spent my whole life following rules, Ben. Raising you, working hard, being responsible. But at this stage, I don't want to sit in a rocking chair and wait for life to pass me by. I sighed. Mom, I get that, but marriage? That's a big deal. She smiled. So is love. I opened my mouth to argue, but then I really looked at her. She looked happy. Not just content, but genuinely, radiantly happy. It was the kind of happiness I hadn't seen in years, not since Dad passed away. And suddenly I realized maybe she deserved this. Maybe love wasn't just for young people. Maybe it didn't matter when it happened, as long as it felt right. Maybe my mom wasn't crazy after all. Well, mostly not crazy. I let out a deep breath. All right, fine. I'll support you. Mom's eyes lit up. You mean it? I rolled my eyes. Yeah. But I swear, if you two start calling each other love bug or sugar plum in front of me, I'm disowning you. Frank grinned. No promises, son. Mom laughed. And for the first time that day, I smiled too. Moral of the story, love has no expiration date. No matter how old you are, no matter how much life you've already lived, there's always room for joy, adventure, and yes, even romance. Even if it means crawling through a side gate and bribing a receptionist with cookies to get there.